What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I am feeling wired for chaos.
Wired for chaos. Oh, hardwired for so much chaos. I love it. I gotta come up with better bits in response. Jeez. My bits are getting stale. Ooh, I don't like the sound of that. Chris, does this feeling of chaos have anything to do with how you're trying to retain your heavy metal street cred?
You know, for what feels like the first time in months, my bit actually has something to do with keeping metal street cred.
There we go. Doing a little happy dance here for our audio listeners.
There you go. So recently, as of this recording, by the time this comes out, it'll be over. But right now, or it just ended. I'm a little fuzzy on the dates. But there was a documentary film festival called Doc NYC. And I saw someone post a link to one of the documentary films that was being shown, which was Harley Flanagan, Wired for Chaos, a documentary about the Cro-Mag's founder, Harley Flanagan. And obviously, I was very interested in this. On this show, we have talked about Harley Flanagan, you know, as a member of Cro-Mag's, and how he got his start as an 11-year-old boy drumming for his aunt's, you know, punk rock band, the Stimulators. And this documentary was great. You know, his aunt, Denise Mercedes, is featured in the documentary. She talks about him as a kid.
Sick.
There's all this great footage of him as a kid. And when you become the drummer for your aunt's band at 11 years old, like, clearly your life is going to be insane. And like his life was insane from the moment he was born. So like it was a really great documentary. It showed a lot about Harley Flanagan's life. It showed a lot about the punk scene in New York City in the 70s and 80s. It showed the things that, you know, regular people were just dealing with in New York City in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
And it was just really cool, you know, seeing the relationships he had with people. You know, there was one of the members of Bad Brains he's really close with. And there were some funny stories when he was talking about his time in the Stimulators where it's like, yes, he's an 11, 12, 13-year-old kid playing in this punk band, being in these punk venues, and it's this like kids just kind of walking around.
Yeah.
But he was still a kid, and there were times where like he acted like a kid, and they told a story where I wish I remembered the guy's name. I sure wrote down. I want to say it was something like Daryl something. I forget the guy's name from Bad Brains, but he went to Harley Flanagan's grandparents' apartment because that's where Harley and everyone was hanging out. And he goes there, and in his bedroom, Harley Flanagan had laid out all these like little army men and was building like a little like war zone going on or whatever. And this member from Bad Brains comes in and he's like, "Oh, what do you got there?" And Harley's showing him everything. And he's like, "Oh, but what happens when a huge bomb goes off?" And like slams on the table and the figures go all over the place. Harley jumps up and like puts him in a headlock. And like they were talking like it was like they were like brothers, you know, the way they were acting. But like you've got this 13-year-old kid who's drumming in a punk rock band, and then like an adult, like a young adult, probably in his early 20s, but still an adult, you know, probably 10 years older than this kid, but like treating him as like a peer in the punk community, but also treating him like the little kid that he was. And hearing those stories were really great because when you hear Harley Flanagan's story, he didn't have a childhood, you know, it was really rough for him. So, but this documentary was great. If you get a chance, I definitely recommend. If you're a fan of punk rock, if you're a fan of hardcore, you know, definitely check out this documentary, Harley Flanagan, Wired for Chaos. It was really great. It was a lot of fun. There was also some great older clips with Anthony Bourdain talking to Harley Flanagan and telling him like, yeah, I met the first time I met you was when you were drumming for the Stimulators. Like Anthony Bourdain was telling a story how he specifically went out to see the Stimulators because like word got around that they have a little boy drumming for them. You know, like that was the novelty. And then you go and it's like, not only is there the novelty of a kid drumming, but the band is actually really fucking good. So I definitely recommend people check out this documentary, Harley Flanagan, Wired for Chaos. Like I said, by the time this comes out, the Festival Doc NYC will be over, but definitely try and check this documentary out because it was awesome.
I love that. I love that that comes from, you know, a film festival. You know that I love my film festivals with the Scared for Your Life horror film festival that, you know, I run, and Chris is gracious enough to do artwork and stuff for us. Definitely check that out if you're a filmmaker. But I love that it gave kind of like a highlight to what Harley's story is, and like you said, sort of the novelty around him being this kid in the punk rock scene, and like having to sort of remind yourself like, wait, he was just a little kid. And it's like, I think we talked about it, was it on the punk rock Big Four episode that we did, where we were like, what if they came out with an ABC show like on TGIF, Kid Drummer?
Or no, it was probably our NYHC deep dive.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. Dude, I love that so much. That's such a cool story, and I love that we get to kind of talk about punk rock a little bit. And kind of the, you know, the history of punk rock, and getting to discuss kind of where punk rock began, you know, with a documentary like that. But punk rock in what it has evolved to now, sort of like black metal. And it's not often that people compare black metal and punk rock. But there are so many different genres and so many different types of punk rock that are out there, right? Punk rock, and you've got hardcore punk, and then you also have pop punk, which has a widespread appeal. You have tons and tons of people talking about being, you know, an elder emo or a pop punk, you know, fan and stuff like that, and memes that get spread around nowadays. And we've decided here, we don't do this often. We don't often do 2 deep dives in a row. But Chris decided to get revenge on me for having him do the industrial deep dive and the goth deep dive so close together that now he's hitting me back a little tit for tat, and we're doing a pop punk deep dive. This was much more difficult for me than I expected it to be, because now I know how Chris feels when I make him do the new metal deep dive or the goth deep dive or the metalcore deep dive, which I know he loved so much. Chris, I was not anticipating this to be such a difficult episode for me to get through in terms of the research, but I feel a little bit better that I'm at the end of this process. Not just because it means I don't have to listen to pop punk anymore, but because I feel a little bit more cultured.
There you go.
Chris, are you excited to take a deep dive into a pair of checkered Vans while we got some fucking Tostinos in the microwave? Are you excited to do this pop punk deep dive?
As I put on my vintage red, white, and blue terry cloth wrist cuff that has got to be 20 years old at this point, you bet your ass I'm excited for this deep dive. I am one of those millennials who loved pop punk. I will, on occasion, go back and listen to these pop punk bands. And yeah, this was, I feel like you've gotten to experience this. Now I get to experience it, where it's like my deep dive is me just like, oh yeah, I like this song, and just like writing down all the songs I liked 20 years ago. And so this was a lot of fun. It was fun to listen to it. It was also fun to kind of read about the history of, you know, where pop punk comes from, and punk rock, and reminiscing about how much everyone fucking hated pop punk and all this and that. But it was a lot of fun. And yes, I am very excited to, you know, get my revenge and subject you to the shitty music that I listened to when I was 13 years old.
You know what I love about it, though, is that like my initial take on pop punk was very much that it is like teenage music. You know what I mean? Like early punk had this feeling of, it was from the art scene and all of this, and it definitely had this air of rebellion where pop punk, you hear the jokes all the time where it's like a 35-year-old guy singing about how he hates his hometown and him and his girlfriend are going out to, get some sodas tonight by the drive-in and all this stuff. And it's like, how is this relatable to you at all? And you're talking about the shitty hometown, and it's like Massapequa, Long Island.
But that's exactly it. And like, I'm sure it'll come up again, but like, punk was about social issues and the shitty conditions in a city, in a major city, and seeing, the racism and the injustices and all of this and that. When you're living in the suburbs, the only thing you have to get stressed out about is like being picked on because like you listen to slightly different music and the girl you have a crush on doesn't like you back. That's all we fucking have in the suburbs. You and me are both from New York, and we're both from Long Island, but we're from different parts of Long Island.
I was about to fucking leap through the screen there, buddy.
You're from Queens, and I am from, I call it the ghetto, but it's still a fucking suburb in Suffolk County. So all I had was the mall and the girls that don't like me back. So that was the angsty thing that I had. And like, it was about hanging out with my friends in their basement, high on caffeine and pizza bagels. You know, like that was it.
Yeah, dude. No, I absolutely like this. I didn't want it to be something. When I first sat down and I was like, okay, I've got to start listening to like pop punk essentials, and I have to start making my way through. I have to treat this like any other deep dive, regardless of my initial feelings about the genre as a whole. But I just found it difficult where I was like, I don't want to work out listening to Blink-182. And so like, Blink-182 just scratches the surface, although they're one of the biggest bands when you talk about pop punk in terms of like, I guess you could say like they're the Metallica of pop punk, right? Where they just are that big of a name. Thankfully, you've done a lot more research about the origins of pop punk. So why don't you kind of lead us down, give us some of the broad strokes, the key elements of pop punk as a genre, and kind of like where the genre started out, because that's stuff that I didn't really get into. I just tried to get a hold on the music itself, but I didn't really do that deep of a dive into the history or the origins of the genre.
So I will say that I went to what would be considered the best punk resource, Wikipedia, and I looked at the pop punk Wikipedia page, and I received psychic damage when they started saying that the Ramones are a pop punk band. And then like you read about punk and it's like, the Ramones are considered one of, if not the first punk rock band. And then it's like, they're a pop punk band. And then I completely blacked out when they said that pop punk was inspired by the Beatles. And at that point, I just like blacked out and woke up in the mall, and with all my friends, wearing my red, white, and blue wrist cuff.
It was a dream. It was just a dream. I'm fine.
So, it was very hard to get a handle on like, okay, if you're going to say that the first punk band is a pop punk band because they're a popular punk band, like there was a critic, I forget his name, who like basically went down the same thing. He's like, oh, you want to get that way? Okay, the Ramones are pop music. The Sex Pistols are pop music. The Clash is pop music. Like that's where you're headed by saying this. So I also didn't get a lot of research because I blacked out upon reading the Ramones and the Beatles in the fucking pop punk Wikipedia page. But in my opinion, and I'm no expert, but this is just kind of the idea I had going in, is that I feel like pop punk kind of starts with Green Day, because in the early to mid 90s, Green Day is coming out with their albums Dookie and Insomniac, where they're doing a style of punk that is a little bit more commercially acceptable.
Right.
Because I don't know about in 1995, but I know now you can hear Basket Case on classic rock radio.
Yeah.
So they're writing radio-friendly punk music alongside a lot of other punk rock bands that would inspire the pop punk bands that we would see. So you have someone like Green Day and a band like Blink-182 who in the late 90s came out with a few albums. But I will say that of those two bands, I always preferred Green Day. I'm not a huge fan of Blink-182. As much as I love pop punk, Blink-182 was not a band I really got into. But for me, it kind of felt like Green Day was really the first pop punk band, in my opinion, partially because they're the first pop punk band I got into. Growing up, my parents had the album Nimrod from 97, which has Good Riddance on it.
Right.
And then in 1998, the Godzilla soundtrack comes out. That has Brain Stew on it. And then,
oh my God, did it?
yeah. And then I think my brother listened to Nimrod, and he's like, dude, you got to listen to Nice Guys Finish Last, Hitchin' a Ride, The Grouch, and all of a sudden we're listening to this more punky pop punk music. And then we get the international super hits, which has like all of their great songs like Brain Stew, Jaded, Longview, Welcome to Paradise, as well as their more recent stuff at the time, Waiting and Warning. And then that's when we get Dookie and Insomniac and all of that. And like, so for me, that's like, I feel like that's where pop punk should start. And maybe I'm biased because of like, that's what I got into. But I just feel like the other bands that kept getting mentioned, I was like, that's not a pop punk band. That's just, the SoCal punk style from the early 90s, you know, because I did see it in your notes with like, they're saying like NoFX and Pennywise are pop punk. And I'm like, no, they're just, they're just punk bands that are playing in that like SoCal punk style, where punk rock kind of did its thing in New York City and then in the United Kingdom. This punk style was almost like alongside grunge, kind of just being like, we're going to like take some of the blast beats from metal and just play this like kind of crazy sounding punk over it that's, at times political, but other times just like not as political as other punk music. And then with pop punk, it's mostly just, jerking off and hanging out with your friends. So,
I feel like it's just warm weather punk, which is like, Ramones, that feels like leather jacket. It's fall. We have seasons, and they're angry about not being able to sniff glue and the KKK taking their baby away. And it just makes sense. That's very East Coast. It's a very East Coast attitude. It's a very East Coast look. And then all the guys from the pop punk scene, or like the SoCal punk that you're talking about, with bands like NoFX and Rancid, were just, they feel like warm weather. It feels like punk music for warm weather. You're at the skate park. You're not in the subway.
Yes.
You are, in your den watching TV and, eating pizza bagels. Yeah. You're not like at the corner bodega or like eating at Aldo's Pizza or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just, it has that feeling. Like, yes, I know that they're just memes, but I think it's true when people say like, pop punk just sounds like what plays in a kid's head as they're like heating up bagel bites. Yeah. It's like, it makes sense. That makes sense to me because it feels like when I used to come home from school and it'd be like, all right, I want a giant bowl of cereal. So I throw in like some cornflakes and then some rice checks because I want a little extra crunch, but then I want some more sugar. So then I also pour in some Frosted Flakes, but there's not enough sugar. So then I also pour some sugar over there, but then I need my potassium. So I slice up a banana. That's what pop punk feels like. Yeah. Because to me, when I heard Green Day, when I first heard Green Day, I heard that and I was like, this is punk music. This just sounds like punk music. When I first heard Rancid, it was Maxwell Murder was on the soundtrack for Dave Mirra's BMX game. and I had like the demo with the first like round on there.
Yeah.
And so I just heard that song constantly, and I was like, this bass line is fucking awesome. What the hell is this? And so it feels like a big bowl of cereal, video games in the afternoon kind of sound. But that just felt like punk rock to me. When I started getting into like pop punk, or like learning about pop punk, or hearing what felt more like pop punk, were bands like Newfound Glory, Good Charlotte, Simple Plan. When those bands started coming out, I was like, oh, that's pop punk, because this doesn't feel like punk rock music. It feels like something that's a little bit more commercial than the other bands. So that's why I was so surprised too to see Ramones on this list, or on these playlists of pop punk essentials. I can kind of see where they're coming from, because it wasn't the Sex Pistols, and it wasn't hardcore punk.
Yeah.
You know, it's not Nausea, but it still had the fundamentals of like early punk rock.
Yeah.
And so that's what was just so surprising to me. I just didn't know why those bands were on there. And then I have it in my notes where I was like, am I not considering these bands pop punk so that I don't feel like I'm giving up like my metal street cred? Like that I don't want to say that I like these pop punk bands. And I don't know that that's necessarily it. Again, I wanted to come at this a little bit more open-minded than that, but I just didn't make sense to me to classify them with the rest of these bands, because like I said, the major bands that I was really able to pick out were bands like Newfound Glory, Simple Plan, Good Charlotte, Green Day, Blink-182. That's sort of what made a little bit more sense to me. Do you remember the first time that you heard a band like Newfound Glory or Simple Plan?
By then, I was already a fan of pop punk, and that was almost like something that I noticed as I was putting my notes together, is that there's a period of time that is kind of like in my opinion, like the golden age of pop punk music for millennials. Mm-hmm. And that's between like 97, 98 and 2004.
Right.
But the peak was 2002. Because in 2002, you have Simple
9/11.
Plan. No. I mean, there was a 9/11, but not the 9/11. Oh my God.
Oh,
I'm
man.
blacking out again. This is the Beatles on the pop punk Wikipedia page all over again.
So in 2002 we had.
So in 2002 you have Simple Plan, Newfound Glory, Sum 41, The Starting Line, All American Rejects, Boxcar Racer, Avril Lavigne, all releasing an album, all releasing music, all considered pop punk bands, pop punk music. You also have Blink-182 in 2003 with their self-titled. You have Green Day in 2004 with American Idiot. So like after that, the newer pop punk bands start to sound a little bit more emo, but that's kind of, so 2002, by the time we hit 2002, I'm already a fan of pop punk, because I'd been listening to Green Day. I became a huge fan of Sum 41. They're still a band that I'll regularly go back and listen to. Blink-182, like I said, my favorite music from them is their self-titled that came in 2003. I like songs like, Damn It, or What's My Age Again, All the Small Things. First Date is a good one. But like, I really didn't listen to the album. So by the time I'm hearing bands like Simple Plan and Newfound Glory, I'm seeing those music videos on Much Music USA.
Right.
Because I'm already looking for Sum 41. I'm looking for Weezer. I'm looking for Green Day. I'm looking for all of the bands that I'm getting into that Much Music would play. Because even though like VH1 introduced me to Sum 41, And MTV was playing some Sum 41 music videos, but like Much Music USA was really playing the music I really liked at the time. So by the time I'm hearing Simple Plan and Newfound Glory, Good Charlotte, I was already a fan of that style of music. So when I heard it, it was just like, oh, great. This is just like more fun pop punk music that I can listen to on top of all of this other fun pop punk music that I'm listening to. You know, so it was, it's not like I listened to Simple Plan and was like, whoa, fucking pop punk. It was like, no, that was almost like, okay, Green Day, Blink-182, and Sum 41 walked so these guys could run. Like these guys perfected the art of writing and playing commercial pop punk, you know? And I think that's why guys like I know Billy Joe Armstrong and Green Day, like I think like fucking, who was it in the Sex Pistols? Someone was giving them a fucking hard time about like not being punk. They were always giving Blink-182 a hard time about not being punk, and like Mark Hoppus being like, I don't care what they think. You know, Sum 41 being told, oh, you're not punk, and they're like, we're not trying to be punk. Yeah. And then you have these bands that are just like, we're gonna fucking write a song that's, you know, perfectly mixed to be, you know, really fucking approachable by teenage kids. And like that was Simple Plan and Newfound Glory and Good Charlotte. You know, that's what they were going for. So it was, by the time you got to those bands, I liked the popular songs. You know, from Simple Plan, like I forget how many Simple Plan songs I like until I start listening to that album from 2002, No Pads, No Helmets, Just Balls. I do anything. I'm just a kid, addicted, perfect. This is where I put my notes. This is the fun pop punk I think of, hanging out with friends in basements, high on caffeine and junk food. Like that was this music. And that's what it makes me think of. It makes me think of the times when I was in my friend's basement and just like hanging out, playing video games, drinking, you know, cans and cans of Pepsi and eating bags of Cheetos. Like that's what we did. You know, so
exactly.
So that's, and I think that's why, you know, for me, I'm so nostalgic, and why so many millennials are nostalgic for this.
Right.
Because it reminds us of a time when like we could have fun without having the overbearing weight of being an adult on us. We were just hanging out, and that was fun.
Or like that for me was nu metal. Like I did experience that. I did experience the like. I remember when Good Charlotte first came out with, was it Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous?
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit. But then I got pissed off because everybody was like, oh shit, you do your hair like Good Charlotte. And I was like, no, fuck you. I did that before I even heard them. And so that's when I was like, nope, I'm going full on nu metal. Fred Durst is right. Everything is fucked and everybody sucks. And so like, I had that same feeling and those same memories, but with a different style of music. Yeah. So like it's so funny, and I think I've brought this up again recently, where I don't have the nostalgia for pop punk music. I don't have the nostalgia for like Vans Warped Tour, like you know what I mean? Like for me anyway, that's not like something that I long for the days of, because I didn't really get into this style of music. It's a style of music that I remember, and I can connect a point in time in my life to these songs or these bands, but not in the way where like hearing Pantera for the first time, I can tell you exactly where I was and like something along those lines. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like what would end up leading me down the path of heavier and heavier music. Yeah. I don't have the same sort of connection with these bands, but I can still put a place and time to them. Yeah. You know what I mean? The thing that they all have in common is that feeling of like being a kid, you know, when life was a nightmare. And like, again, going through like what everyone was considering like the major bands, like a band like NOFX, I was like, I'd never really listened to NOFX because I was like, oh, they're a pop punk band, so I'm not gonna fucking listen to them. I only became aware of them once I was deep in the weeds of being a fucking metal purist, and I was not about to start fucking listening to NoFX. So listening to them now, I was like, this is just Rancid. This reminds me a lot of like Rancid, like that style of music. And it's fun. That's kind of what I put down in my notes. It's sunny East Coast music. It just feels like you're at the beach, you're at the skate park, and then you're just hanging out. And same thing with mxpx, which just sounds like slightly more of the emo thing going on with the vocals, but it's the same sort of music as NOFX in my head. They had some pretty funny songs. Chick Magnet was really funny.
Yeah.
And oh god, there were a few others, but Chick Magnet's the one that jumps out at me. And I actually remember watching an episode of like some HGTV show where they like renovated the lead singer's house.
Oh, yeah.
And they like put up lyrics to an mxpx song, and like they engraved it on this metal piece and they put it in his kitchen, and him and his wife were like crying, like so emotional over these lyrics because he had like written it for his wife or something like that. And I was like, oh, it's the guy from HGTV. Like that's how I know him. But yeah, do you have any other examples of bands that you would say are like, if you had to give someone like the roadmap for pop punk, who are some of those other major bands that you would point out to them?
You know, I feel like the bands we've talked about, obviously, you know, Green Day, Blink-182, Sum 41 are bands that I loved. Simple Plan, Newfound Glory definitely represents very specific aspects of pop punk. You know, I feel like Green Day, Blink-182, and Sum 41 is more of like setting the groundwork. You know, you listen to Sum 41 and they're like a mix of Iron Maiden and NOFX, you know, like those were their influences.
Right.
But I feel like bands that I think should be mentioned, I think I already mentioned them, The Starting Line, their 2002 album, Say It Like You Mean It, their song The Best of Me, I feel like even in the Wikipedia page I read, like they're like, that's like quintessential pop punk, and almost like bridges the gap between what was pop punk and what became emo music. And I remember the Best of Me was a song that I did enjoy, and I have memories of my friend had a band. He was a drummer, huge Blink-182 fan, huge Travis Barker fan. So they were this 3-piece pop punk band going in the direction of emo, and I remember going to a skate park and watching them perform and them playing The Best of Me by The Starting Line, and like it was fun to like be like hanging out with my friends at the skate park and like jumping around on the ramps and everything, and like jumping off of the fun box in the middle of the skate park while we're all like dancing around to this pop punk music. There was like one hardcore band, because what was funny was that, like, at the same time I'm getting into pop punk, Saint Anger comes out.
Right.
And everyone is telling me to listen to Metallica. So at the same time that I'm still very much enjoying pop punk, I'm also getting into Metallica and Pantera and Slayer and Anthrax. And so it was this funny mix of, like, I'm hanging out with all my pop punk friends and we're all listening to fucking Green Day and Blink-182 and, you know, listening to this one song from The Starting Line. And then there's this other dude who's like, all that music sucks. And then I'm over there, I'm like, you guys fucking suck, as we start like moshing to like, you know, the hardcore band. And then I was like, wait, Chris, you were literally just over here eating fucking mozzarella sticks and like, you know, jump moshing, and now you're windmilling with your friend over there. Like, pick a fucking side. But like, that's what it felt like. And it was, and I think what ends up happening is that as I get into Metallica, the new bands that come up go into that emo thing, which I'm not into. So The Starting Line is definitely a band I thought I should mention. Lit, My Own Worst Enemy, I feel like is perfect fucking pop punk.
That's just a great fucking song.
But I mean, it's pop punk. You know, that's more in line with like Simple Plan pop punk to me.
Right.
You know, that, and then they had another song I really liked.
Don't say that. Don't tell me that I like something similar to Simple Plan.
I tricked you, motherfucker.
God damn it.
But yeah, bands like that, even like the All American Rejects, their first album has songs like Swing Swing, and the last song, I fucking love those songs. Everything they've done since then sucks. I
Yeah.
listened to some songs off of this album. Most of the rest of the album sucks. But these two
Yeah.
songs, fucking phenomenal. Love these two
Yeah.
songs. So, like, those are songs I would point to. I think Boxcar Racer is also a band I like. That was one of the, like, 40 side projects of the guys of Blink-182. This one was Tom DeLonge, Travis Barker, and then two other guys. They released this one album, songs like I Feel So and There Is. Like, those are songs that I really love, and I really liked Boxcar Racer because I really liked it sounded different from Blink-182. And so I really liked Boxcar.
I'm feeling this. I'm feeling this.
That's Blink-182 off of
okay.
the album Blink-182. No,
Got it,
I Feel So is 'cause I feel so mad, I feel so angry, I feel so something, so less confused, something like that. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
And then there is
And on this episode of Scrap Metal Karaoke.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like that. But it's just I think I also preferred Tom DeLonge's voice over Mark Hoppus's voice, which I think is part of the reason why.
Which one is which?
So Tom DeLonge is the one who's like, "Where are you?" Like, that's Tom DeLonge.
Okay.
Where Mark Hoppus is the other voice in, because that's I Miss You, and they both sing in that. And Mark Hoppus is the one who sings the beginning of the song, and then Tom DeLonge comes in and does the thing that, like, so like in the 90s you had everyone doing the fucking like fucking, Darius Rucker voice.
Right.
With pop punk, everyone was doing the, I'm so angsty, hanging with my friends at the mall.
Yeah.
Like, everyone was doing that voice.
Yeah.
So that's like a bunch of bands that,
So
I've
what
done
fucking
imitations
songs does Mark
of.
Hoppus sing?
Mark Hoppus does What's My Age Again? Okay. I think he does
Took a ride on a Friday night. I was alone.
yeah, maybe.
Right? Something like that?
Something that's that's What's My Age Again. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I know they kind of went back and forth, but yeah, it was like
I have so much unreasonable dislike in my heart for Travis Barker. But I'll explain this. So this is story time with John. Because I diverted onto the nu metal path, all of my friends, especially friends that were in bands and were drummers, were like, fucking Travis Barker's the greatest fucking drummer ever, man. It's like fucking, and I'm like, first off, his elbows are too fucking high, and I don't like his fucking tattoos. I'm telling you, unreasonable hatred for this man, to the point that, like, when I see that he's like doing another project with some up and coming artist, I'm like, fucking, of course he is. Fucking this guy. He is my Dave Grohl. I see Travis Barker the way you see Dave Grohl. And it's not warranted. I don't know the man from a hole in the wall. And yeah, he's a fine drummer. But it just annoyed me so much how often I had to hear what a great fucking drummer Travis Barker was. And I was like, you guys ever hear of fucking Joey Jordison? Fuck you. Yeah, man. I mean, if anything, the instrument that deserves the biggest shout out in pop punk is the fucking bass. Because so many bass players in pop punk do the thing that, like, me as someone who plays bass loves so much, is like really outlining the chords and really leaning into like walking the bass.
Yeah.
And just having like Matt Freeman from Rancid.
Yeah.
Phenomenal fucking bass player. He's so fucking good. His YouTube channel is fucking awesome because he just does like playthroughs of stuff, and he'll like have him and his tech on there, and they'll talk about like gear, and he'll do interviews. Mike Dirnt from Green Day is fucking awesome too. I think I heard a song from Goldfinger that did something similar to that too. That's just like the really cool, like that walking bass. They're like outlining every single chord. Maybe it was either Goldfinger or the Buzzcocks, but that is really fun to me because it adds that kind of feeling of like you're getting up and you're clowning around and you're just like playing, just like having a good time with your friends. That's what that form of or style of bass playing sounds like to me. And like, I don't know, is Goldfinger pop punk or is that like ska?
I mean, Goldfinger I've always seen more classified as like third wave ska. They definitely
I didn't hear any horns on the song that I heard, though.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of ska from Goldfinger, but they're definitely more of a third wave ska band. I feel like there's almost like the scale of like them, where it's like they're almost more rock with some ska, and then you have Less Than Jake in the middle, who like straddles the line between being like pop punk and ska. And then you go to like a band like Real Big Fish, who is very much third wave ska and like mixes in some punk or pop punk elements, but it's mostly just third wave ska. And so I feel like, because, I've seen Goldfinger tour with Real Big Fish. I've seen them, I want to say it was called Skanksgiving in at Starland Ballroom. And I want to say I went.
Great.
I want to say me and my brother went twice, because I can never remember who was at which shows. But we saw like bands like Five Iron Frenzy, Biebs and Her Moneymaker, Suburban Legends, Big D and the Kids Table. I know this band Beautiful Bodies was there, who they're not even a fucking ska band, but they were there. And
There's
yeah,
always
it was,
one.
and I feel like Goldfinger, it wouldn't surprise me if you heard that walking bass line, because that's a huge part of ska.
Right.
And I know that because I played bass in me and my brother's attempt at a ska band. And like I was learning the bass lines to songs like Sell Out and Beer. And I feel like there was like one other song we would play. But like, so I get what you're saying with the bass, where it's like that kind of helps set the mood of just kind of having a good time, because I feel like the walking bass line helps do that in ska music and third wave ska. So I can tell how like, the bass I feel like is more forward in ska music, whereas in pop punk it's kind of back there, but it's still setting the foundation of like, no, this is fun. It's going to move around a little bit. It's going to set the mood. I seem to remember trying to learn how to play bass for some Newfound Glory songs. So it was like, that was kind of the thing I was doing, because at the time I was learning how to play bass. But yeah, it's fun music to hang out with your friends with. And yeah, like you're saying, because I saw you had it where it's like bands like The Descendants. Who the fuck calls The Descendants pop punk? They're a straight up punk rock band. Milo Goes to College came out in 82. They're a fucking punk rock band. Get this shit out of my face.
But I was just gonna ask, like, bands like The Descendants and like Bad Religion and Pennywise, they came up on so many lists, and they just sound like punk music to me. Yeah. And I guess that's where I'm like, I don't want our listeners to leave as confused as I was. But like, give me as the resident expert here, give us some clarification on like why are Descendants not pop punk, and why would someone put a band like Pennywise on that list, when to me it just sounds like, I think I put in my notes, they're a hardcore band with nice vocals. Like the guy just sounds polite.
See, I think what happens is you have people like us, and I think most millennials, who use pop punk to talk about the music we listened to when we were in high school, because that's kind of what it was being called at the time. It was being called pop punk. So that's what we listened to. But then you have folks that say, well, pop as a genre doesn't exist, because pop is short for popular. Right. So any song that is popular is a pop song. So when Metallica gets popular for Master of Puppets, that's now a pop song.
Yeah.
When
pop metal.
Yeah. So, I think what happens is you have folks like that that say, hey, Descendants had a pretty popular punk song. That makes them pop punk. NOFX plays some pretty popular punk music. That makes them a pop punk band. That's why the Ramones are called a pop punk band by some of these people, because they're playing popular punk rock music. So for me, and I think colloquially, we refer to pop punk as that music that came out between the late 90s and early 2000s that turned into emo music. That's pop punk music. So bands like NOFX, MXPX, Bad Religion, Pennywise, maybe Rancid, maybe The Offspring even, that's just 90s punk. Like,
right.
It's not...
I love The Offspring.
It's not the late 70s, early 80s punk. It's not the Stimulators. It's not Cro-Mags. It's not Bad Brains. It's not that as aggressive punk rock music. But I think, and I don't know where they're really all from. I know it kind of gets lumped in as being called as like SoCal punk. But it's like you're saying, it's almost like punk rock music is punk that's being played in CBGB or like a dirty New York City club. Whereas the 90s punk is being played at a skate park or like
an emptied out pool
in a basement in the suburbs, you know? And so there's a lot less of the things that people that live in the city deal with and a lot more of just like, I'm an angsty teen and I have nowhere to put it because I live in the most like milquetoast fucking town on the planet. I literally have nothing to be angsty about except for the fact that I'm a teenager full of raging hormones. And so I need to put that angst somewhere.
That's what they should have called the song I'm Just a Kid. All of that.
Cuz that's what, like, I'm Just a Kid is literally like, it sounds like one of my fucking...
But he wasn't. But he was like 20-something.
But still, the thing is that, like, he still went through that experience. I don't know how old he was when they recorded the song. But, like, they all could pass for, like, maybe not, like, 13 years old, but they could pass for late teens, early 20s, you know. Fucking James Hetfield on Kill 'Em All looks less 18 than any of these fucking dudes in the early 2000s. But, I mean, Richie Valens, the picture I've seen of him where he's 17, he looks 40. So, like, as time has gone on, young people look younger. But, like...
It's retroactive aging.
Yeah, but I just feel like it is kind of this idea where it's like, I don't have anything to really be angsty about.
Right.
I like this style of punk music, but I'm living in a fucking suburb that's 99% like middle upper class white people. What do I really have to be mad about? The mall closes early on Sundays? Like, that's the social injustice I'm dealing with? So, like, I can kind of get why someone who maybe that's their experience and they love this punk rock music, it's fucking fear. I love living in the city where, like, it's exaggerated, but is it really exaggerated? Talking about fucking cockroaches on the walls and fucking people dying in the streets. And this fucking documentary I just watched about Harley Flanagan, that it was not a fucking exaggeration. You know, the shit that I'm seeing, this footage I'm seeing of, you know, 1970s New York City, you know, this guy growing up in the Bronx. So it is kind of that music that's for, you know, the kids that didn't really see that type of shit. You know, as much as I talk about growing up in the ghetto and people setting off fireworks for no fucking reason at all, it's still a fucking suburb in the middle of Long Island. Like, there's I'm not dealing with the same shit that these punk rock bands are dealing with. And as much as I love the punk rock music, this pop punk music is more of something I can get into. Fucking American Idiot, one of the characters is called Jesus of Suburbia. It's literally about a kid growing up in the suburbs, falling in love with this punk rocker who then kills himself and then goes off and works in a fucking corporate job in an office. Who the fuck does that sound like? You know? I fucking, like, okay, my punk idols haven't killed themselves, but, like, yeah. I fucking grow up in the suburbs. I'm trying to be tough and angsty as I get into punk and metal. And now I go to work in a fucking button-down shirt. Like, I had something, again, pop punk for the suburbs where the biggest issues are being uncool and the girl you like that you have a crush on doesn't like you back. And now I'm nostalgic for those days because I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about my car. I'm worried about buying a home. And the girl I have a crush on doesn't like me back. I'm dealing with that still. So no wonder I still love pop punk music.
It sounds like you're starting to head down the emo route, my friend.
Fuck
and
that.
I tricked you back, son of a bitch.
Shit.
I was finding myself, this is where I had the toughest time, because I was like, I'm absolutely not listening to fucking Panic at the Disco and Taking Back Sunday because or My Chemical Romance, because these are bands that I already knew I did not like.
Yeah.
So I was like, I tried to give them each their space, and I tried to hold space for them to try and give them a fair shake, and it's just not for me. And I think that that's fine to say, right? Is that it's not. You've said it on every deep dive we've done.
Yes. it's my slogan at this point.
It's just not for me. I cannot get into Taking Back Sunday. I cannot get into My Chemical Romance. And I think that a lot of that is that it's the time for it has passed. It's too late for me to be to really connect with My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
Our friend Anna from the Hauntsville Cryptcast and from the Scared for Your Life Horror Film Festival, 2 plugs in one episode.
Hell yeah.
She has been really encouraging me to go back to listen to My Chemical Romance, because she's like, her husband Anthony was like, Anthony's a huge My Chemical Romance fan, and I've never liked them. And I was making fun of the advertisement for 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge the other day, talking about how I was like, I think that it's just, I'm past the point where I'll ever get into them. And I was making fun of this ad where I remember seeing it on MTV2, where it's a bunch of kids in a schoolyard drinking rancid milk, and then they turn into zombies. And then they put their fists in the air and they're like, buy the new album, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge from My Chemical Romance. And I was like, I remember seeing that and being like, this is fucking lame. And Michelle, my wife, is like, that's literally everything that you like. Teenagers becoming zombies from rancid milk. If it wasn't My Chemical Romance, you'd be all about it. And I'm like, you're absolutely correct. Because that's what it was, is I was so deep in my hatred for anything MCR, because what do you get called as a metal kid? Oh, you guys like My Chemical Romance? Anytime you are a fan of one style of music, and someone who does not listen to that style tries to hurl an insult at you using the wrong type of band, it just makes you hate that band so much. But it was the same thing with Taking Back Sunday. I had an art teacher who used to play Taking Back Sunday during class, and I was like, this sucks. I was like, put the fucking Ramones back on. That's so much better. Panic at the Disco is a band beyond the level of dislike I have for Travis Barker, because I know that my dislike of Travis Barker is misplaced and is just a thing that I decided to have as part of my personality when I was 11, and I still have it now, just because I've been committed to the bit for this long. But Panic at the Disco just writes, in my opinion, terrible music. Yes, it's grand. Yes, it's very, very showboaty, but it's theater kid music. It's just theater kid music. And same thing with Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy I could never get into. Then you've got Paramore, where Paramore writes a couple fucking hits, and then here I am telling my wife, hey, can you put that playlist with Rose Colored Boy on again? That song fucking slaps. I love that fucking song. That song is so good. Paramore sounds best when they're trying to be like an 80s type band. And Hayley Williams gets so much credit from me because I never gave her any credit when I was younger, when they first came out. And I was like, fuck her voice. It's not that great. Meanwhile, I was like, holy shit, this is really impressive. But again, I was insufferable back then. And the band that I remember first reading was we're an emo band, but not in the way that you guys are defining emo now, is Jimmy Eat World. I remember article in Guitar World or something with the band, and they were talking about how they were like, yeah, we're an emo band, but we're an emo band in the sense of like emotional hardcore. Like that was the style of music that we grew up with. We grew up in the hardcore scene, and then you got emotional hardcore and like that Midwest emotional hardcore, which turned into just emo.
Yeah.
And then emo became Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy and all those other bands. And Jimmy Eat World is so much better than those other fucking bands. Dude, the middle, and mind you, it's all really poppy, commercial, accessible music.
Yeah.
But there is something about the level of songwriting from those songs that just blew me away every time I heard them. The sweetness. Holy shit. Get a couple beers in me, and there's a jukebox around. It's like that meme. He's like, oh no, he's going for the jukebox. It's me with a Jimmy Eat World shirt on. And I'm going to put the sweetness on, and I'm going to be singing the lyrics at the top of my lungs. Like, that song is great. The middle is great. But they have way more songs than I even remembered. Oh, Bleed American. Bleed American is great, which I kept getting confused with Franco Un-American, and I quickly learned that they're not the same song at all.
No.
But yeah, Jimmy Eat World is great. Jimmy Eat World is great, and them being a self-proclaimed emo band, I think makes them have more street cred than any of the other bands that were dubbed emo. Just because, again, I have to be somewhat insufferable about the bands I like. And I mean, to go back to a band that you mentioned before, just because I would hate not talking about them, The Offspring. The Offspring is fucking phenomenal. They are so much fun to listen to. And they are absolutely one of those bands that, to me, just screams, like you said before, 90s punk.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like pop punk to me the way that I knew it and the way that I defined it. And they're absolutely one of those bands where I was like, yeah, no, these guys rock. I love them. And they're just tons and tons of fun to listen to. The Kids Aren't All Right. Like that's a great song.
Yeah.
Just literally any song by The Offspring I can listen to again and again. Self-Esteem. What's that song? Why don't you get a job?
I'm not sure.
And on this episode of Karaoke Time with John.
Yeah, the only other Offspring song I'm thinking of is Come Out and Play. I fucking love that song. Come Out and Play
is great.
That's a great
Gotta
one.
keep them separated.
Yeah.
That's great. Dude, such good music. Such good music and really fun music. But I mean, I know that you're an enormous fan of emo music, Chris. Do you get what I mean? Do you get what I mean in regards to like pop punk took a very clear, like there was a very clear diversion of the direction that the music went in when it went to emo. And that's an episode for a whole other time. Maybe, probably not.
Yeah. I feel like the rule has to be the music can only be insufferable for one of us.
Yeah.
We can't.
Otherwise, that's not a fun episode for you guys.
It's a very short episode of us being like, yeah, we listened to 30 seconds of 40 different songs and decided they all suck. We'll see you next time. But yeah, emo music was not my thing either, and I'm right there with you with bands like Fall Out Boy, Taking Back Sunday, My Chemical Romance. I didn't like those bands in high school. I don't like those bands now. And that's the direction pop punk went in, and like it went in that direction at the same time that I was discovering metal. So
right.
I was listening to a band like Sum 41. Like I said, they are taking Iron Maiden, Metallica, and NOFX and cramming it all together. I mean, on their debut album, Half Hour of Power, the first track is a song called Grab the Devil by the Horns and Fuck 'Em Up the Ass. It's an instrumental that sounds like an Iron Maiden song.
Yeah.
And then they go into other songs that sound like NOFX songs. And then later in their career, in 2004, Chuck comes out. And there's the song The Bitter End, which is their attempt at rewriting Battery. Like, you can sing the lyrics to Battery to this song. Like, they were just trying to write a thrash metal song. So I think the fact that my favorite pop punk band was injecting as much Iron Maiden and Metallica into their music as possible, it was like priming me for the moment when I finally heard Master of Puppets or Battery. You know, by the time I heard The Bitter End, I already heard of Battery because that was my first thought when I heard The Bitter End in 2004. But like when I'm listening to these songs that are very clearly influenced by Iron Maiden and Metallica, when I finally listen to Iron Maiden and Metallica, I'm like, oh, I understand why my favorite band loves these bands.
Yeah.
And and like now I'm listening to my favorite band's favorite band. And so that's why I was able to very quickly and very easily go from, fucking Sum 41 and Green Day is the shit, to actually Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax blow all that shit out of the water. I would much rather listen to Iron Maiden and Judas Priest than any of these other fucking bands. And so I am going through that at the same time that pop punk is becoming emo music. And so, I had no interest in any of those bands either. I'm not sure how much Paramore I've even listened to. I know a lot of people love Paramore, but I feel like I haven't really given any of those bands a chance. The only reason I listen to any of these bands' songs is because Robin Adele Anderson covers them. You know, there she is. There she is. She covers fucking I'm Not Okay and Welcome to the Black Parade and I Write Sins, Not Tragedies and what's the fucking Fall Out Boy one? Fuck, Sugar We're Going Down. Like I'll listen to her covers of those songs, but that's the only reason I listen to any of those fucking songs. So I'm right there with you with all of the emo songs. I'm glad that we can kind of, come back together strong and remain strong as metal brothers.
Metalheads together strong.
Yes. Yes. Which one of us is Caesar then?
You could be Caesar.
You sure?
You got a better beard.
I thought that might make me the really big orangutan that he's doing the fucking sign language to.
Maurice?
Yeah.
I'll be Maurice.
Or maybe he's King Louis from the Jungle Book,
Oh, man. So you would agree then that a lot of it has to do with the time that you heard the music, right? It's like like when you had gotten into it. Because had you been a little bit younger, I'd imagine then you would have been there at the tail end of 90s and 2000s pop punk and then been introduced to these bands way younger.
Yeah.
So it would be, I guess you could surmise that there's a better chance that you would have gotten into those bands.
Yeah, I think it's definitely based on, how old I was when I started getting into this music and where I was and the people I was hanging out with. And it's funny, I feel like I was thinking about this recently, how I'm the older brother that introduced my little brother to all the music I'm listening to. So I'm 16, 17, 18 listening to Metallica, introducing my brother to these songs when he's 13, 14, or 15. So he's the age I was when I discovered Sum 41, and I'm telling him about Metallica. He was 10 years old when I'm, telling him that I just saw the music video for Fat Lip, and Sum 41 is the coolest fucking band in the world. And we're in our pool, above ground pool, in the suburbs, over the summer, talking about how cool fucking Sum 41 is as we're, making a whirlpool with our inner tubes in our above ground pool. So it was the perfect music for us. And, that's what I got into. And like you're saying, if I was younger, I might have gotten into that emo music and I might have missed out on some of that other pop punk that I love now, because what's funny is I stuck with Sum 41 right up to and including their 2007 album Underclass Hero. And that was a cool album because it was a return to a pop punk sound. Almost sounded like they were using some of the pop punk sound that Green Day used on American Idiot. but it was their first album without their lead guitarist Dave Brown sound. And even though all the guys are clearly into Iron Maiden and Metallica and all that metal music, it felt like Dave Brown sound as the lead guitarist was the one who really brought that metal influence. So once he wasn't in the band, plus I think Derek Whibley was like dealing with alcoholism and shit like that.
Right.
He had a much more pop punk and more emotional writing style. So you go from Chuck, which is partly based on their experience in, I want to say, the Congo, where they were like trying to like do this documentary and raise money as like a humanitarian type of thing. And like their hotel was under attack. And a UN representative named Chuck is the guy who saved their lives and got them out of the hotel. So they named the album after him. And so you kind of have the, I guess, PTSD of that experience, plus the metal influences gives you the album Chuck. Dave Brown sound leaves, maybe the metal influence leaves, and they write another pop punk album. And I really like that album. Then they release Screaming Bloody Murder, and I'm like, all right, Sum 41 is done. I can't listen to it anymore. Yeah. And so that's, 2010, 2011, which by that point I'm graduating college, and you have now gotten me to listen to Overkill and Testament, and, I'm still in my Slayer Reigns Supreme, most unbearable. So I was definitely not the audience for that, which is so funny. That's the album that was out when me and my brother see them perform their 10th anniversary for Does This Look Infected? And they're going to play the album in its entirety. We go to the Paramount, and we are the only people there not wearing the wristbands that indicates that we are underage. So the Shots girl is literally just hanging out with me and my brother because we're the only ones there that can even order shots. And me and my brother are like, we are not doing fucking shots of Jack Daniels. Been there, done that. It was a mistake. We're not doing it this time. But then, Sum 41 comes out, and there's all these kids that are there for Screaming Bloody Murder. And, Derek does the Hawk Tuah from the Hell Song. And all of a sudden you've got these teenage girls running away from the stage as all of these millennials are running towards the stage because we all want to mosh and dance to this, pop punk kind of metal music that Sum 41 was doing on Does This Look Infected. So I think the age you are when you discover this music is always going to be huge. You're always going to think that the bands that you discovered when you were 15 years old is the peak of music, and everything that comes after that is garbage. You're always going to think that no matter what year the original music came out, you're always going to think your favorite song at 15 years old is the pinnacle of songwriting. And I think that's the way it is for a lot of, millennials like me that do reminisce about listening to pop punk, hanging out with our friends, singing along to these songs, watching episodes of Jackass, like that was what we did, So I think that's why for me, I love this music, and this is my opportunity. After you've gotten so many fucking opportunities to do this, this is my opportunity to just gush about how much I love this music and how important it was to me as a kid living in the suburbs, hearing about how, I'm just a kid, life is a nightmare because my friends didn't text me to hang out at the park today.
Chris, I know that you just put some Elio's pizzas in the microwave, so I don't want to hold you back from them, but can you quickly give us your suggestion for this episode?
Oh, man. So my suggestion for this episode is a band by the name of Student Rick, and off of their only album, Soundtrack for a Generation from 2001, I am suggesting everyone check out the song Falling for You. This song was featured in not a Tony Hawk game, but the video game Aggressive Inline, which was an inline skating video game, also introduced me to Real Big Fish. But this song Falling for You is phenomenal. Off of this album is also the song Monday Morning, which I think I have heard somewhere and didn't know it was them. It is a catchy song, but I definitely love the song Falling for You. So yeah, my suggestion is you guys definitely check out Student Rick, their song Falling for You. It's a pop punk song that I feel like not a lot of people know. I seem to remember like posting the lyrics one time and someone was like, "Oh, I fucking love that song." And I'm like, "Holy shit, someone else has heard of Student Rick. That's amazing." So yeah, they're definitely not one of the most popular bands. Honestly, not a lot of the music off of this album sounded all that great, but these two particular songs, Monday Morning, Falling for You, these songs are great. They're great pop punk songs from a somewhat great pop punk band, Student Rick, and that's my suggestion, Student Rick and the song Falling for You.
Oh, man. All right. I've got a lot to live up to. And I might have misunderstood the assignment, but Chris, you reminded me that you had suggested Sugar Ray as your suggestion for our new metal deep dive. So listen, I mean, don't blame me, blame the people who made up the lists, okay? My suggestion for this episode is the band Pennywise, who I listened to for the very first time just yesterday. And the reason they're my suggestion is because I spent a lot of time actually listening to them and being like, oh, okay, I get it now. I know tons and tons of people like Pennywise, and I can see why. It's like, they're like a hardcore punk band, but I think I was saying before, with polite vocals. Yeah. Like the singer just sounds like he's going to knock at your door, ask if you can come out to play, and then you'll be back before the streetlights go off. So yeah, their songs, Bro Him, which Chris tells me is a classic. I'm just learning this. Fuck Authority. And Fight Till You Die. Fight Till You Die was a song that I heard, and I was like, this is just a fucking hardcore song with clean vocals. Like it was really funny to me to hear that style of vocal delivery with the type of music that I'm used to hearing, like someone like Harley Flanagan just fucking screaming over. So go ahead and if you're like me and you don't know a lot of pop punk or a lot of punk, or had to go to Wikipedia to find out if this band even qualifies as pop punk, then check out the band Pennywise and their song Fight Till You Die. Thanks for tuning into the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night.